Welcome to another edition of the Left Hand Path. Here we discuss issues and topics relating to metaphysics, astrology, and astrotheology. The word sinister comes from the Latin for left hand. With a basic understanding of Kabbalah and astrological principles, we can shed light on the occult forces underpinning the globalization project, exposing its sinister progression towards the left-hand path. Gershom Scholem, one of the world-leading authorities on Jewish Kabbalah, wrote about Jacob Frank. Jacob Frank will always be remembered as one of the most frightening phenomena in the whole of Jewish history, a religious leader who, whether for purely self-interested motives or otherwise, was in all his actions a truly corrupt and degenerate individual. After Frank's release from prison in 1772, he initially settled in Gino, Moravia, in the now Czech Republic. Here he lived with his relatives, Solomon and Shiendel Dobrushka. Solomon was a wealthy businessman, owning both the potash and tobacco monopolies in Moravia. Throughout this period, Frank would give his wife and daughter over to the Sabbatean sect to be used for immoral sexual acts in orgies and satanic rituals. Solomon and Shiendel had 12 children, all of which were Frankists. Of the 8 who openly converted to Christianity, 6 eventually gained titles of nobility. Once out of prison, Frank was free to circulate among the rich and influential elements of European Jewish society, no doubt in an attempt to spread his Sabbatean philosophy and to recruit new sponsors. Where Frank obtained the money for the upkeep of his court was a constant source of wonder and speculation, and the matter was never resolved. Doubtless, some system of taxation was organized among the members of the sect. Stories circulated about the arrival of barrels of gold, sent, some say, by his followers, but according to others, by his foreign political employers. The Frankist elite consisted of a circle of very gifted intellectuals, theologians, and men of letters, as well as a group of men of great financial means who were, for the most part, great merchant bankers and exerted tremendous influence in their day in the highest financial circles of Europe. Robert Eckers, Sibling Rivalry on a Grand Scale, The Devil's in the Detail, 2011. During this period, he visited many cities, especially Vienna, taking his daughter with him. Around this time, while he networked himself among the rich and wealthy, Frank came into contact with Adam Weishaupt, a German philosopher, professor, and founder of the Bavarian Illuminati. Weishaupt was born in 1748 in Ingolstadt, Bavaria, to the descendants of Jewish converts to Christianity. Freemasonry was steadily expanding throughout Europe in this period, offering attractive alternatives to free thinkers. Weishaupt initially thought of joining a lodge. Disillusioned with many of the Freemasons' ideas. However, he became absorbed in books dealing with such esoteric themes as the mysteries of the 7 sages of Memphis and the Kabbalah, and decided to found a new secret society of his own. On his travels, Jacob Frank would outline his perverted ideologies in sermons, meetings, and presentations, providing an overview to future converts as to what to expect from the cult which he was promoting. Not only was he inverting all those righteous and positive messages found in the traditional Judaic interpretation of the Torah, but he wanted to destroy all existing systems of both religious and social structures, with a view to creating a new order from the chaos which he and his followers hoped to foment. Wherever Adam trod, a city was built, but wherever I set foot, all will be destroyed. For I come into this world only to destroy and to annihilate, but what I build will last forever. Jacob Frank. Frank was under the impression that in order for humanity to ascend to greater levels of conscious awareness, they must first descend down to the very bottom rung of existence. Only from the bottom of the mountain can humanity climb to the very top, where infinite consciousness can be grasped and understood. The Frankists aspired to a future time when every righteous religious belief system had been eradicated, initiating a global revolution which would sweep away the past and begin the process of rebuilding society from the very bottom. I did not come into this world to lift you up, but rather to cast you down to the bottom of the abyss. Further than this it is impossible to descend, nor can one ascend again by virtue of one's own strength, for only the Lord can raise one up from the depths by the power of his hand. Since we cannot all be saints, let us all be sinners. Jacob Frank. All this pessimistic rhetoric which Frank promoted influenced many impressionable minds throughout Europe prior to the French Revolution, a revolution which would ultimately dismantle the old custodians of traditional standards of morality. In 1786, Frank moved from Moravia to Offenbach, on the outskirts of Frankfurt, the same city where the Rothschild banking cartel began and the home of Adam Weishaupt. For these three to be in the same city at the same time, in my view, is not a matter of innocent coincidence. It opened up an opportunity which allowed the coordination of big projects to manifest easily with big money. In Offenbach, Frank lived a regal lifestyle, underpinned by some of the biggest banking houses in the city. He was even given the title Baron of Offenbach. After Jacob Frank's death in 1791, his nihilistic Frankist nephews, Moses and Emmanuel de Bruschka, went to Paris to join the Jacobins, a group of political revolutionaries promoting anti-royal sentiments together with the dismantlement of the old political order. Both Moses and Emmanuel changed their surnames to Frey and became heavily involved in the French Revolution. By 1794, with the end of the Reign of Terror, both brothers were executed for treason using a new execution device called the guillotine. As long as the last divine sparks of holiness and good which fell at the time of Adam's primordial sin into the impure realm of the Qliphoth have not been gathered back again to their source, so the explanation ran, the process of redemption is incomplete. It is therefore left to the Redeemer, the holiest of men, to accomplish what not even the most righteous souls in the past have been able to do, to descend through the gates of impurity into the realm of the Qliphoth, and to rescue the divine sparks still imprisoned there. As soon as this task is performed, the kingdom of evil will collapse of itself, for its existence is made possible only by the divine sparks in its midst. The Messiah is constrained to commit strange acts, of which his apostasy is the most startling. Of all these, however, are necessary for the fulfillment of his mission. Sabbatean and Frankist philosophy towards redemption, by Gershom Scholem. The Sabbatean Frankists believed that a new world order had begun with the arrival of their Messiah, Sabbatai Zevi, whose messianic soul reincarnated into Jacob Frank. To the Frankists, this meant everything to do with the old world, its systems of religion and political order had to be dismantled, a process which they thought must be achieved through any means necessary. Furthermore, because their Messiah had set a precedence of concealing his true intentions through apostasy, hiding behind another religion, his followers were also expected to conceal their true leanings towards nihilistic Frankism. In their own words, the Torah of Beria was to be violated, while the Torah of Atzilut was to be observed in secret, a philosophical ideology which would underpin many future secret societies. For the Frankists to believe that the more they sinned, the more they hasted the coming of redemption, is contrary to all those who were trying to climb the tree of life, walking a difficult path of righteousness and high standards of morality. This includes traditional Judaism as well as Muslims, Christians, and Buddhists alike. According to Gershom Scholem, Sabbatean nihilists regarded violating the Torah of Beria on the most consecrated ground of all, Israel, the supernal triad, to be the pinnacle of sinning, which would bring about special significance with profound revelations. For those on the side of righteousness, they regarded anyone who attempted to descend down the tree of death, for whatever reason, even if they were trying to destroy the Qliphoth with their holiness, were deluded. It is believed that once a person falls into the arms of Satan and his entourage, they would find it virtually impossible to return, a position where even the Lord will not pardon them. Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. Matthew 26:41. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. 1 Timothy 6:9. Flee from sexual immorality. All other sins a person commits are outside the body, but whoever sins sexually sins against their own body. 1 Corinthians 6:18. The acts of the flesh are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity and debauchery, idolatry and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissension, factions and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. Galatians 5:19-21. In the second half of the 18th century, Jesuits were being expelled from a number of Catholic countries around the world, due to an internal conflict within the Church. As a result, in 1773, Pope Clement XIV issued a papal brief known as Dominus ac Redemptor, which essentially suppressed the Jesuit order's influence throughout Christendom. This papal order opened up influential positions throughout society which were once filled by Jesuits. One of these positions was Professor of Canon Law at Ingolstadt University, a city 300 kilometers southeast of Frankfurt. Adam Weishaupt, who had graduated in law at the university in 1768, had studied ancient Greek and Eleusinian mysteries, together with the mystical doctrines of the Greek philosopher Pythagoras. He eventually became a professor of law within the ranks of the university's staff. In 1773, Weishaupt took over the position of Professor of Canon Law, becoming the only non-clerical professor at the institute, which, on the whole, was run by Jesuits. At this time, a period viewed as an era of enlightenment saw many people trying to break free from the controls and rigidity imposed upon them by the old order, which mainly consisted of Catholicism and the rule of the monarch. This period of relative enlightenment promoted thoughts of atheism, together with a nihilistic view towards the establishment. Freemasonry was already well established by this time, and seen by some as an old boys' network, which ultimately made up part of the establishment's fringe tentacles. Weishaupt was interested in Freemasonry, but saw many of its members lacking in occult knowledge and understanding of its ancient pagan religious roots. He therefore decided in 1776 to form his own exclusive and elite secret society based around the Freemason model. This became known as the Bavarian Illuminati, adopting the owl of Minerva as its symbol. At the beginning, there were only a handful of members who were at a similar end of the radical and free-thinking spectrum as Adam Weishaupt. However, after 10 years, this had risen to well over 2,000. New members were referred to as Minervals, after the pagan goddess of wisdom, reflecting the order's symbol of the wise old owl. In 1777, Weishaupt joined the Masonic Lodge of the Strict Observance Rite, Lodge Theodore of Good Counsel in Munich, an order which practiced a form of Neo-Templar Masonry. His radical philosophy was similar to that of the Frankists, in the sense they both desired to do away with the old systems of governance in favour of creating an order out of its demise. Weishaupt wrote, "At a time, however, when there was no end of making game of and abusing secret societies, I planned to make use of this human foible for a real and worthy goal. For the benefit of people, I wished to do what the heads of the ecclesiastical and secular authorities ought to have done by virtue of their offices." Adam Weishaupt. Within the order of the Illuminati, Adam Weishaupt adopted the name of Brother Spartacus, a name which came from a 1st century Thracian gladiator who escaped bondage to lead a slave uprising against the then Roman Republic. This is interesting in itself. Maybe Weishaupt considered himself as a new Spartacus, a modern gladiator in a battle with Rome's successors, the Catholic Church and the Holy Roman Empire. The initial objectives of the organization appear to have wanted to promote equality and freedom throughout society, and in order to achieve this aim, the authority of religious doctrines needed to be replaced by rationalism. As the order of the Bavarian Illuminati grew, its inner circles, a sophisticated network of spies and counter-spies, became detached from the outer circles of less important members. Like most secret society structures, this would keep the important overriding objectives concealed. It is speculated that Weishaupt's underlying motive for joining the Freemason Lodge in Munich was to attract new recruits for his own organization. The contradiction faced by most movements seeking enlightenment through the process of free thought and rationalism was in itself restricted by the order's internal rules and regulations, which ultimately came from those within its inner core and ruling council. For the first 8 years of the Illuminati's existence, it grew rapidly, spreading out from Bavaria into neighbouring cities and countries. As it spread into France, Italy, and the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, its members mainly came from the upper and middle classes, attracting aristocrats and even royals. Another contradiction arises when one considers Adam Weishaupt's vision of a future without monarchy, private property, social inequality, national identity, and religious attachment. Although he aspired to all the concepts mentioned, he filled the ranks of his organization with the very kinds of people which he desired to undermine. While Christians of good standing and character were actively encouraged to join, Jews and pagans were not. In 1779, Adam Weishaupt was persuaded to set up his own branch of Freemasonry, which was named Theodore of Good Counsel. This new lodge was filled with members of the Illuminati, and used as a springboard to influence and infiltrate other Masonic lodges with Weishaupt's radical beliefs. As Weishaupt's lodge networked itself among other Masonic lodges, it grew in stature, becoming accepted as an independent mother lodge affiliated to both the Union Lodge in Frankfurt and the Premier Grand Lodge of England. With this new status, it was able to spawn Masonic lodges of its own. The Illuminati continued to recruit by spreading their message of liberalism. However, this began to threaten the power base of both the clergy and the monarch, which resulted in a reversal of various laws and policies, returning to a more traditional and hardline conservative approach. This U-turn created resentment among the educated classes who were trying to promote their idea of liberalism in what they regarded to be a new optimistic age of enlightenment. This frustration and resentment ultimately promoted more recruits into the arms of the Illuminati. In 1783, Frederick the Great, ruler of Prussia from 1740 to 1786, was made aware of various documents belonging to the Illuminati, containing material of a revolutionary nature, which alarmed him. As a result, all of Berlin's Masonic lodges were warned against the order, accusing the Illuminati of rejecting orthodox Christian theology, along with the desire to undermine existing religions, while at the same time attempting to turn Freemasonry into a political system. Consequently, the Three Globes, the oldest Masonic lodge in Germany, sent out a call to reject the Illuminati and to no longer recognize them as fellow Freemasons. This began the decline of the Illuminati. An internal conflict flared up, resulting in resignations and a fall in membership. Their anti-religious and anti-monarchical stance placed them in the firing line as their secret society was slowly becoming public knowledge. It is claimed that in early 1785, an Illuminati courier by the name of Lanz was struck by lightning on his way to Ratisbon, carrying sensitive documents outlining plans for a revolution in France. Officials who found the documents passed them over to the government of Bavaria, who initiated an investigation into the affairs of the order. Public resentment and suspicion increased, casting doubt over positions of power occupied by members of the Illuminati within civic and state organizations. This put pressure on Charles Theodore, Prince-elect and Duke of Bavaria, to find a solution. Consequently, in March 1785, Theodore's government banned all secret societies, including the Illuminati. Adam Weishaupt lost his position at Ingolstadt University and as a result relocated to Regensburg, a town close to Ingolstadt, halfway between Frankfurt and Vienna. It is worth pointing out that this is the period when Jacob Frank moved to Offenbach, a town on the outskirts of Frankfurt. Over the next few years, raids took place on the homes of officials of Illuminati members by officials working for the Bavarian government. In 1787, only a few years before the French Revolution, when government agents had collected enough information on the matter, they published their findings in a 426-page book entitled Some Original Letters of the Illumination Order. According to the New Dawn magazine, the publication resulted in the following conclusion. They revealed the full extent of the Illuminati's alleged plans to destroy Christianity, topple the monarchy, overthrow the civil governments of Europe, and eventually extend their influence worldwide. Even though it was claimed these documents were blatant forgeries, as a result of their publication, the order was legally prohibited, and membership of it could result in the death penalty. Although the Illuminati were outlawed in Bavaria, some scholars believed that the movement's ideology, along with many members, went underground, morphing into pockets of influence within other organizations and movements, holding on to whatever positions they had gained within the ranks of Freemasonry. As a result of the ban, much of the Illuminati's writings were destroyed, giving rise to more mystery and speculation surrounding the movement. The overriding intentions of the Illuminati could be viewed in some ways as altruistic, within a desire to advance civilization towards socialistic rationalism underpinned by science and atheism. To achieve these objectives, most of the old social norms of the day, based on religion and class, needed to be dismantled, thus posing a threat to the existing establishment. To be part of a sophisticated group during that time, whether it be a secret society, a religious fraternity, or Masonic order, represented a person's standing within their community. It was a status symbol, reflecting how the individual wanted to be viewed by others, similar to today's status regarding car ownership or other symbols of success. To the men of the 18th century, it gave them a sense of superiority, dressing up their egos, intellect, and moral character within an artificial world of mystery, magic, and pseudo-power. Many of these groups and organizations promised some form of enlightenment through knowledge which only a select few were allowed access to. Knowledge which had been kept throughout the ages by mystery schools, shamans, and secret orders, a knowledge so valuable it could give to those who understood it paranormal powers beyond their wildest dreams. However, like most secret groups and orders, only those trusted ones at the inner core were given the keys to unlock these mysteries. In my view, it is plausible to assume that at the central core of these mechanisms of mysteries lay Kabbalah, exposing the truth behind both the tree of life and the opposite tree of death. At this time, both the Illuminati and the Frankist Sabbateans were seeking dramatic changes within society. Although they came from different perspectives, they each had common goals towards the establishment, desiring an end to religious influence, together with an end to the aristocracy and monarchical rule. They both saw revolution as the first step towards this objective, creating an opportunity for a new type of order out of the chaos which a revolution would bring. It is possible that elements of the Illuminati joined with elements of the Frankist movement in order to promote their common goals. Being so close to Frankfurt, the home of the Rothschild banking dynasty, made financing these objectives a great deal easier. I have heard much of the nefarious and dangerous plan and doctrines of the Illuminati, but never saw the book until you were pleased to send it to me. George Washington to William Russell, September the 28th, 1798, Library of Congress. It was not my intention to doubt that the doctrines of the Illuminati and principles of Jacobinism had not spread in the United States. On the contrary, no one is more truly satisfied of this fact than I am. George Washington, in a letter to Reverend G.W. Snyder, 24th of October, 1798. There is sufficient evidence that a number of societies of the Illuminati have been established in this land of gospel light and civil liberty, which were first organized from the Grand Society in France. They are doubtless secretly striving to undermine all our ancient institutions, civil and sacred. These societies are closely leagued with those of the same order in Europe. They have all the same object in view. the enemies of all order are seeking our ruin. Should infidelity generally prevail, our independence would fall of course. Our republican government would be annihilated. Joseph Willard, United States congressional clergyman and president of Harvard University. I have been convinced that we, as an order, have come under the power of some very evil occult order, profoundly versed in science, both occult and otherwise, though not infallible, their methods being black magic, that is to say, electromagnetic power, hypnotism, and powerful suggestion. We are convinced that the order is being controlled by some sun order, after the nature of the Illuminati, if not by that order itself. We see our edifice crumbling, and covering the ground with ruins. We see the destruction that our hands no longer arrest. A great sect arose, which, taking for its motto the good and the happiness of men, worked in the darkness of the conspiracy to make the happiness of humanity a prey for itself. This sect is known to everyone. Its brothers are known to less than its name. It is they who have undermined the foundations of the order to the point of complete overthrow. It is by them that all humanity has been poised and led astray for several generations. They began by casting odium on religion. Their masters had nothing less in view that the thrones of the earth and the governments of the nations was to be directed by their nocturnal clubs. The misuse of our order has produced all the political and moral troubles with which the world is filled today. We must from this moment dissolve the whole order. Duke of Brunswick, Grand Master of German Freemasonry, 1794. From Adam Weishaupt's perspective, the crackdown on his movement in Bavaria was not necessarily the end. It could be argued that the Illuminati had infiltrated other organizations to such an extent that there was no going back. Do you realize sufficiently what it means to rule in a secret society, not only over the lesser or more important of the populace, but over the best of men, over men of all ranks, nations, and religions, to rule without external force, to unite them indissolubly, to breathe one spirit and soul into them, men distributed over all parts of the world. Adam Weishaupt. The governments of the present day have to deal not merely with other governments, with emperors, kings, and ministers, but also with the secret societies which have everywhere their unscrupulous agents, and can at the last moment upset all the government's plans. British Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli. From the days of Spartacus Weishaupt to those of Karl Marx, to those of Trotsky, Bela Kuhn, Rosa Luxemburg, and Emma Goldman, this worldwide conspiracy for the overthrow of civilization and for the reconstitution of society on the basis of arrested development, of envious malevolence and impossible equality, has been steadily growing. It played a definite recognizable role in the tragedy of the French Revolution. It has been the mainspring of every subversive movement during the 19th century, and now, at last, this band of extraordinary personalities from the underworld of the great cities of Europe and America have gripped the Russian people by the hair of their heads and have become practically the undisputed masters of that enormous empire. Winston Churchill, writing on Zionism versus Bolshevism in the Illustrated Sunday Herald, February 1920. Surely these facts show that the anarchists of France knew of the German Illuminati and confided in their support. They also knew to what particular lodges they could address themselves with safety and confidence. But what need is there of more argument when we know the zeal of the Illuminati and the unhoped for opportunity that the revolution had given them of acting with immediate effect in carrying on their great and daring work? Can we doubt that they would eagerly put their hand to the plough? And to complete the proof, do we not know from the lists found in the secret correspondence of the order that they already had lodges in France, and that in 1790 and 1791 many illuminated lodges in Germany, Mentz, Worms, Speyer, Frankfurt, actually interfered and produced great effects. In Switzerland too they were no less active. They had lodges at Geneva and at Bern. At Bern 2 Jacobins were sentenced to several years' imprisonment, and among their papers were found their patents of illumination. I also see the fate of Geneva ascribed to the operations of Illuminati residing there, by several writers, particularly by Goethe and by the Göttingen editor of the Revolution Almanac. John Robinson, Professor of Natural Philosophy and Secretary to the Royal Society of Edinburgh, 1798. The Rothschild family dynasty came to dominate European banking from the late 18th century onwards, and by the middle of the 1800s they had become the richest family in the world. They began in 1743, when Amschel Moses Bauer opened a money-changing house in the Jewish ghettos of Frankfurt. To promote his money-lending business, Amschel hung a red shield from the front of his premises. From then on, the local community referred to his business as the Red Shield Firm. In 1755, after producing 8 children, Amschel died a premature death from smallpox, leaving the family business to his 4th son, Meyer Amschel Bauer. Eventually, Meyer Amschel Bauer changed the family name to Rothschild, reflecting the red shield which symbolized the business. Meyer soon discovered that lending money to royalty and governments was far more lucrative than lending to the general public. Plus, it had the added security because the loans were secured against future taxation. Meyer had 10 children, 5 of which were boys. When the boys were old enough, he sent them out to create private banks in 5 of the most prominent European countries, with the aim of dominating the world's banking system. Working together as a network of family banks, they would finance both sides of European political and military conflicts, collecting vast profits from all the chaos which they helped to support. Nathan in London took advantage of Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo by taking control of England's stock and bond markets. Using his own private couriers and carrier pigeons, he managed to get the news of the outcome of the battle ahead of everyone else. With this knowledge, he began slowly selling stocks and bonds, which set off a panic in most of the markets. Investors who watched closely assumed England had lost the war. Once the stocks bottomed out, Nathan instructed his agents to begin buying everything up at giveaway prices. By the time the official news of Wellington's victory arrived in London, prices shot back up. At this point, Nathan was laughing, as most of the important aspects of England's commercial and financial infrastructure was now in the hands of the Rothschilds. By the middle of the 19th century, they had become the wealthiest family on the planet. In 1850, James Rothschild in France was said to be worth 600 million francs, 150 million more than all the other French banks combined. With this wealth came power, and with most of Europe's monarchs and governments in debt to the Rothschild banking cartel, they now had the power to influence policy. The lender is always master over the borrower. Masters at organization and control, the family now had the opportunity to direct the future course of human history, combining their power with established European royalty and aristocracy. They united to help propel the British Empire to the next phase of global imperialistic domination. They worked together to undermine the American Republic, the German Republic, Russia under the Tsar, China, Africa, and anywhere else which had ambitions of independence. The goal was globalization under their control. They financed the Rockefellers, the Kuhn Logans, the Harrimans, the Vanderbilts, the Carnegies, the Morgans, and Cecil Rhodes, all acting under the direction of the lender, the House of Rothschild. By controlling a country's private central bank and owning the majority of major stocks in the country's industrial and commercial infrastructure, some of these owners were in a position to steer those indebted nations in any direction they desired. Occasionally, they would come up against a rogue leader who wanted freedom, liberty, and sovereignty for his nation. These independent mavericks were soon dealt with and brought back under control. During the First World War, J.P. Morgan was assumed to be the richest man in America, but after his death it was discovered that he was just another agent for the House of Rothschild. Governments, monarchs, and business owners throughout many parts of the world gradually succumbed to the parasitic influence of Rothschild finance, failing in their duty to shield their subjects from the ravages of debt slavery, instead turning on their people to service the interest on huge loans through various methods of unfair taxation. Much was written about the Rothschilds during the 19th century, but once they took control of the media and its outlets, they could censor what was being said about them, essentially going underground. The few who understand the system will either be so interested from its profits or so dependent on its favours that there will be no opposition from that class. Let me issue and control a nation's money, and I care not who writes the laws. Meyer Amschel Bauer Rothschild. History records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments by controlling money and its issuance. James Madison, the 4th United States President. A power has risen up in the government greater than the power themselves, consisting of many and various powerful interests, combined in one mass and held together by the cohesive power of the vast surplus in banks. John C. Calhoun, Vice President and U.S. Senator, from a speech given on May the 27th, 1836. The government should create, issue and circulate all the currency and credit needed to satisfy the spending power of the government and the buying power of consumers. By the adoption of these principles, the taxpayer will be saved immense sums of interest. Money will cease to be master and become the servant of humanity. Abraham Lincoln, the 16th President of the United States. These international bankers and Rockefeller Standard Oil interests control the majority of the newspapers and the columns in those papers to club into submission or drive out of office officials who refuse to do the bidding of the powerful corrupt cliques which compose the invisible government. Theodore Roosevelt, the 26th President of the United States. By remaining behind the scenes, they, the Rothschilds, were able to avoid the brunt of public anger, which was directed instead at the political figures which they largely controlled. This is a technique which has been practiced by financial manipulators ever since, and it is fully utilized by those who operate the Federal Reserve System today. G. Edward Griffin, American political commentator, writer, and documentary filmmaker. The Rothschilds belong to no one nationality. They are cosmopolitan. They belonged to no party. They were ready to grow rich at the expense of friend and foe alike. John Reeves' book, The Rothschilds, The Financial Rulers of Nations, 1887. In the book, Bloodlines of the Illuminati, Fritz Springmeier suggests that the Rothschilds are the leading family within the circles of the Illuminati. Furthermore, Jim Marrs, in his book, The Illuminati, The Secret Society That Hijacked the World, points out a possible link between the Rothschilds and members of the Illuminati. Not only do I have too many eyewitnesses who have come from the inside of the Illuminati who say the Rothschilds are one of the top, but one can also point to how much control and wealth the Rothschilds exercise. The process of history has been to increase their control and wealth. The overall picture can't be denied. The Rothschilds are not flunkies for some other more powerful family. The 18th century Jewish philosopher and Bible translator Moses Mendelssohn, known as the German Socrates, was a student of the Kabbalah and was a mentor to Adam Weishaupt, founder of the Illuminati. Mendelssohn may have also been a link between Weishaupt and banker Meyer Rothschild. Another link was Mendelssohn follower Michael Hess, the tutor of Jacob Rothschild's children, who later headed the philanthropic school for needy Jewish children established by Meyer Amschel Rothschild in Frankfurt. Jim Marrs, The Illuminati, The Secret Society That Hijacked the World. The true activities and involvement of all these groups regarding the political landscape of the last 250 years is uncertain, as secret societies and private organizations, they have a vested interest in keeping their affairs and objectives out of public scrutiny. Consequently, because of the lack of transparency within these secret groups, the level of cooperation between them will always be an exercise in speculation. What is known is that various credible individuals throughout this time period, who have no connection or vested interest in these groups, have suspected and warned the rest of us about a possible hidden hand, a hand which may not have the interests of the majority of us at its heart. Instead, there appears to be a sinister hidden hand concealing overriding objectives behind the public charade of geopolitics. At this point, it is important to recap on the common objectives of all the forementioned groups. The Rothschilds, to control the world's monetary system. The rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is slave to the lender. Proverbs 22:7. The Frankist Sabbateans, to sin in order to walk among the cliff-off, down the tree of death, to destroy all existing systems of religion, to destroy all existing systems of government, to foment chaos. The Illuminati, to abolish religious influence over public life, to promote rationalism and science over religious belief, to abolish abusive state power, to seek wisdom and enlightenment through knowledge. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit, to the extent that it is in my control, and no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. Part of John F. Kennedy's speech to the Press Association, 1961. The real menace of our republic is the invisible government, which like a giant octopus sprawls its slimy legs over our cities, states, and nations. John Hylan, Mayor of New York City, 1922. Behind the ostensible government sits enthroned an invisible government owing no allegiance and acknowledging no responsibility to the people. From the platform of President Theodore Roosevelt's Progressive Party. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are moulded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. Edward Bernays, the father of public relations, writing in his influential 1928 book, Propaganda. But quite frankly, there is an outside source which we refer to as the deep state, or the shadow government. There is a lot of influence by people which are actually more powerful than our government itself. Ron Paul, former United States Representative, November 2016. I merely say that by certain processes, now well known and perhaps natural in themselves, there has come about an extraordinary and very sinister concentration in the power of business in the country. However it has come about, it is more important still that the control of credit also has become dangerously centralized. The great monopoly in this country is the monopoly of big credit. So long as that exists, our old variety of freedom and individual energy of development are out of the question. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is privately concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men, who, even if their action be honest and intended for the public interest, are necessarily concentrated upon the great undertakings in which their own money is involved, and who necessarily, by very reason of their own limitations, chill and check and destroy genuine economic freedom. This is the great question of all, and to this statesmen must address themselves with an earnest determination to serve the long future and the true liberties of men. This money trust, or as it should be more properly called, the credit trust, of which Congress has begun an investigation, is no myth. It is no imaginary thing. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. No longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and the duress of a small group of dominant men. Woodrow Wilson, The New Freedom, 1913. So you see, my dear Coningsby, that the world is governed by very different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes. Coningsby, 1844, by Benjamin Disraeli, two-time Prime Minister of Great Britain. In his book, Tragedy and Hope, A History of the World in Our Time, 1966, Carroll Quigley discusses the great monopolies of industry and banking which dominated much of the world before World War I. As early as 1909, Walter Rathenau, who was in a position to know, since he had inherited from his father control of the German General Electric Company and held scores of directorships himself, said, 300 men, all of whom know one another, direct the economic destination of Europe and choose their successors from among themselves. 50 men have run America, and that's a high figure. Joseph Kennedy, July 1936. 50 men in the United States have it within their power, by reason of the wealth which they control, to come together within 24 hours and arrive at an understanding by which every wheel of trade and commerce may be stopped from revolving, every avenue of trade blocked, and every electric key struck dumb. Those 50 men can paralyze the whole country, for they control the circulation of currency and can create a panic whenever they will. Senator Chauncey Depew, New York, an attorney for Cornelius Vanderbilt, president for New York Central Railroad, and U.S. Senator from 1899 to 1911. There exists a shadow government, with its own air force, its own navy, its own fundraising mechanism, and the ability to pursue its own ideas of national interest, free from all checks and balances, and free from the law. Daniel Inouye, United States Senator, 1963 to 2012. The Masons are not a secret society as such, but a society with secrets, a large international organization with an estimated 5 million members in nearly every country in the world. It is based on medieval stonemasons' guilds, Old Testament symbolism, ancient Egyptian mystery religions, and the construction of Solomon's Temple. They publicly refer to themselves as morality veiled in allegory. There are many levels of Freemasonry, known as degrees, with the majority falling into the Blue Lodge order. From here, members progress up 3 degrees before splintering off to either the Scottish Rite or York Lodges. The highest known level is the 33rd degree, which is the Grand Sovereign Inspector General. A significant number of the influential elite within Western society were, and in some case still are, Freemasons, including politicians, lawyers, barristers, and policemen. all looking out for one another as fellow Freemasons, swearing an oath to secrecy and allegiance. Oblivious to its true purpose, many Freemasons think they are just part of an old boys' network, hoping to further their own personal careers and social status. They lack the understanding of what Freemasonry is really built upon. Like all religions, its core belief stems from aspects of astronomy, astrology, metaphysics, ancient mysticism, and Kabbalah. This is easily identified by analyzing Masonic rituals and symbolism, which also have a great deal of Judaic influence. The Freemasons regard Nimrod as one of the founders of Masonry. He is generally considered as the one who proposed building the Tower of Babel and directed its construction. Nimrod is often associated with the constellation of Orion, and he was renowned for his rebelliousness against God. Sirius is a star 20 times brighter and bigger than our own sun. It was worshipped in ancient Egyptian mythology. The legend of Isis, Osiris, and Horus originated from those ancestors who studied the heavens, focusing on the Sirius star constellation, which became the ancient Egyptian Trinity, similar to the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit of the Christians. Some scholars believe that Sirius is the sister star to our own sun, moving within a binary which completes a full cycle every 25,800 years. Freemasonry use Sirius symbolism throughout all levels of the fraternity, suggesting they have some affiliation to the planets, stars, and luminaries. In Masonic lodges, Sirius is known as the blazing star. As the new initiate Mason progresses up the ladder of degrees, they are exposed to ancient knowledge and wisdom in a steady process of enlightenment. As the penny begins to drop, their level of understanding concerning occult mysteries and holy science becomes clearer. An emphasis is made in the holy science. In this case, holy means holistic or whole. Once you are exposed to the whole picture within the science of light, your chance of becoming illuminated is greatly increased. Most of man's religions, in general, do not enlighten the believer. Instead, they offer part of the equation, half-truths, which cloud and confuse the minds of those followers who, on the whole, are righteous, but spiritually stagnant within the rigid dogma surrounding these religions. Solomon's Temple plays an important role in Freemasonry, an ancient temple supposedly constructed by King Solomon and his master masons, headed by a man called Hiram Abiff. Although the legend suggests that the temple was built to hold the Ark of the Covenant, there is no archaeological evidence to support the physical existence of the first temple, only the account mentioned in the Bible. When we examine the whole concept of Solomon's Temple from an astrological perspective, it all begins to add up. Solomon is a constructed name which refers to the sun in 3 ancient languages. Sol, Latin for the sun. Om means the sun in Hindu Sanskrit. On, in biblical Hebrew, Heliopolis, city of the sun, was referred to as On. Solomon is just the sun in 3 ancient languages. Solomon's temple is often depicted with 2 large pillars each side, just like the pillars of Kabbalah, severity and mercy, with mild equilibrium in the center, where access to the temple and the Creator can be found through its doorway. The story told by Freemasons is that Hiram Abiff, the master mason, during the final stages of constructing Solomon's temple, was approached by 3 lesser stone workers who threatened him with death unless he revealed the master mason's secret password, a word which they thought would grant them access to wisdom and paranormal powers. Hiram Abiff refused to divulge the password and was subsequently murdered by the 3 commoners. Outraged at this, King Solomon found the body and reburied the remains in an ornate temple commemorating Hiram as an honorable master mason. The murderers were eventually caught, tried, and executed. The Masons hold Hiram Abiff in great esteem as an example of honor amongst Masons, keeping their oaths and secrets even to the point of death. Hiram Abiff is mentioned in the Bible, but there is no account of his murder. His name is interesting from an astrological point of view. Hiram refers to Aries, the ram. Aries also represents the head or the crown chakra, the Hiram. Abiff starts with A and B, the first 2 letters of the alphabet, letters associated with Aries, the beginning of the year in the ancient calendar. The G in the center of the famous Freemasons' emblem is the highest letter in the zodiac alphabet. It could also be associated with the G in Gemini, with its twin pillars, Castor and Pollux, the pillars either side of Solomon's temple, and the pillars found in Kabbalah. Symbolism is very important in the process of reprogramming a belief system into the subconscious mind, aligning oneself with the energetic frequencies associated with the symbols or ceremonies used. All new recruits must take part in rituals and ceremonies attaching emotional stimulus to suggestions, transforming the individual into a pliable and useful member for future Masonic aspirations. The outer circle of fresh initiates rarely come into contact with the inner circle of established Hiram Masons, who set the direction and course of the overall organization within modern society. At each level of Freemasonry, from the 1st degree to the 33rd, the Mason must perform a ritual ceremony and take an oath to keep secret passwords and knowledge within the Brotherhood. The penalty for divulging these secrets can be horrific. 1st degree penalty: throat cut, tongue buried in the sands of the sea. 2nd degree penalty: heart plucked out, placed on highest pinnacle of temple. 3rd degree penalty: disemboweled, bowels burnt to ashes. 7th degree York rite: top of skull taken off, brain exposed to noonday sun. At the 33rd degree level, it has been reported that the initiate is asked to drink wine from a human skull, symbolizing Holy Communion with a Masonic twist. The oaths within the Brotherhood of International Freemasonry transcend national and political allegiances, creating a powerful, unaccountable, and influential organization throughout the world. As a Mason progresses up the ranks of the fraternal order, his fellow Masons will do all they can to protect him from outside harm, even shielding his involvement in criminal activities. In 1826, a Mason by the name of William Morgan aired his intentions to publish a book exposing the Freemasons' secrets. Still under his Masonic oath, he found himself arrested under spurious accusations, later to disappear, never to be seen again. The Freemasons were blamed for his death, which in turn caused a huge anti-Masonic backlash, giving the Masons a bad reputation for the next few decades, with many members leaving, causing many lodges to close. However, by the end of the 19th century, their numbers had recovered back to where they once were. Around the time of Albert Pike, 1809 to 1891, any person of renown who was respected in the circles of high society would join one of many Freemason lodges. Some researchers have concluded that Jack the Ripper was a Freemason, performing Masonic ritual killings throughout London's Whitechapel district in 1888. They proposed that the second heir to the English throne, the Duke of Clarence, also a Freemason, had fallen in love with a common Catholic prostitute by the name of Annie Crooks. It is claimed that he married her and had a daughter. Annie was set up with a place to live along with a nanny to help take care of the baby. However, the nanny they hired eventually turned to prostitution to increase her income and began spreading news of the royal secret among other Whitechapel prostitutes. Eventually, some of the prostitutes threatened to expose the story to the press unless they were paid off. At the time, the Prime Minister Robert Cecil, who was also a Freemason, together with the Police Commissioner Sir Charles Warren and Sir William Gull, the royal physician. It is suggested that either the Queen or the Prime Minister gave the go-ahead to eliminate this threat, which had the potential to undermine the royal establishment's reputation. It is claimed that the royal physician was called upon to neutralize the problem. Consequently, Gull, the royal physician, went on a killing rampage to protect his fellow Masons, who likewise protected him. The interesting part of this case is the way the victims were murdered. It was as though they were in accordance with Masonic oath penalties. Their throats were cut from ear to ear, and their bowels were ripped out of their bodies, etc. Prior to being called Jack the Ripper, the killer referred to himself as Leather Apron, a reference to a lamb skin or leather apron given to master masons. It has been suggested that the reason why Leather Apron was never caught was because he was surrounded and protected by fellow masons in high positions. Many influential figures throughout history have been Freemasons, with an allegiance taking precedence over many other aspects of their lives. Cecil Rhodes was a member of the Bulawayo Lodge in Rhodesia. In 1895, he donated some land over to the order for the construction of a temple. During World War II, both Churchill and Roosevelt were high-ranking Freemasons, brothers in war, and also united within international Freemasonry. Churchill joined the Stodholm Lodge in May 1901, a time when becoming a Mason was seen as a symbol of social status. Prince Edward, a Grand Master for 25 years, was soon to be king following the death of his mother, Queen Victoria. Edward, a popular monarch, gave prestige and credibility to the order while promoting it as a tool for British imperial aspirations. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was initiated into the Scottish Rite of Freemasons in October 1911. By 1929, he had reached the level of 32nd degree and became a Shriner in Sirius Temple of the ancient Arabic order Nobles of the Mystic Shrine. By the time the National Socialists came to power in Germany, Roosevelt held a number of honorary Grand Master positions, one in Georgia and one in the Order of Demolay. There had been rumors and speculations about Joseph Stalin's Masonic ties ever since the war finished, but there is no conclusive evidence to support these claims. However, the fact that two of the big three, both Churchill and Roosevelt, were Freemasons leaves one to conclude that Masonic influence must have played a part in the policies of the Allies. When a person decides that they want to join a Freemasons' lodge, they must first ask to join. If you are regarded as a suitable candidate, you may be asked to fill out a petition form. Your request for membership is then voted on by existing members using a secret ballot system. The traditional method used is based on astrological symbolism. A white ball is chosen for yes, and a black ball or cube is chosen for no. The white ball represents Venus energy of love and liking, whereas the black ball or cube represents Saturn's serious and restrictive energy. In this case, a rejection. Most members will be unaware of this, blindly accepting it as a glorified game of marbles. The planet Venus is shrouded by a layer of reflective clouds made from sulfuric acid. This gives the planet a light yellowish-white appearance. The Bohemian Grove is a large forested area in Northern California, where a 140-year-old private San Franciscan men's art club holds a 2-week encampment for its members and their guests, and includes some of the world's most powerful men. Senior members of the Grove with a 40-year service are elevated to the prestigious status of Old Guard. This gives them priority and VIP treatment at seminars and ceremonies. Like the Illuminati, the Bohemian Grove has an owl for their mascot and emblem. Standing at center stage at the edge of the lake in the grove is a 30-foot concrete statue of an owl, the symbol of wisdom. Some spectators have suggested that the owl represents Moloch, one of the top demons of the underworld. At the start of the event, a ceremony called Cremation of Care is performed in front of a 30-foot owl. A mock human sacrifice, along with its burning, takes place in front of a large audience by a selection of robed members purporting to be performing an exorcism. The reason they give is that this helps to ensure the success of the ensuing 2 weeks. This whole ceremony has a definite ancient occult overtone. The Bohemian Club has a patron saint, John of Nepomuk. Furthermore, similar to the Freemasons' Hiram Abiff, their saint suffered death rather than disclose closely guarded secrets, reminding Bohemian Grove members of their expected cooperation. Democracy must be built upon open societies that share information. When there is information, there is enlightenment. When there is debate, there are solutions. When there is no sharing of power, no rule of law, no accountability, there is abuse, corruption, subjugation, and indignation. President of Kosovo. There is nothing so despicable as a secret society that is based upon religious prejudice and that will attempt to defeat a man because of his religious beliefs. Such a society is like a cockroach. It thrives in the dark. So do those who combine for such an end. William Taft, 27th President of the United States. Skull and Bones is a secret society located within the grounds of Yale University, established in 1832 by William Huntington Russell. The university was founded by Eli Yale, a wealthy opium trader with connections to the East Indian Company. Russell, who was also involved in the drug business, had a successful shipping firm which dominated the United States side of the Chinese opium trade. The Skull and Bones secret order became a recruiting ground to preserve power and commercial interests of prominent families in the area, many of whom were connected and profited primarily from the opium business. Drugs in those days were not illegal. They acted as a mechanism of control and influence, addicting people from all walks of life while generating profit and political leverage for the sellers, people who cared not for the well-being of their victims. The opium trade eventually led to the Opium Wars, which brought about the British Empire's control over Hong Kong. Each year, the Skull and Bones secret society would select a mere 50 new recruits from all those enlisting as first-year students. In their final year at Yale, they would become members of the order through an initiation ceremony. Each generation of elite families would ensure their sons were chosen, keeping the power tight within the same circles. George W. Bush was a member along with his father and grandfather, a family name synonymous with bonesman. Being nominated a bonesman would certainly guarantee you a prominent position in the outside world, together with financial success in areas of politics, banking, law and commerce. Bonesmen would take care of bonesmen. Considering only 15 new recruits are initiated each year, the number of bonesmen in top jobs is disproportionate to the rest of the population. During the 2004 presidential campaign, the electorate were given two choices: George W. Bush or John Kerry, both members of Skull and Bones. While swearing an oath of secrecy within the secret order, they opposed each other in public as political rivals. Just like many other secret societies, the initiates go through an array of macabre occult rituals. The Skull and Bones is no exception. It has been reported that while the initiate lays helpless in a coffin, he is flanked by members dressed as the devil and others dressed as hooded skeletons, chanting words like "the hangman equals death, the devil equals death, and death equals death." In the temple itself there is a room called the tomb, which houses numerous human skulls and bones presented in decorative display cabinets. Overall, an unhealthy fixation of death seems to be the overriding theme. There is a rumour that Prescott Bush, along with fellow bonesmen, robbed the grave of the Apache chief Geronimo back in the early part of the 20th century. The story suggests that they took his skull and displayed it in a glass case within the tomb of their temple. The symbolism behind the societies 322 and Skull and Bones are still secret, but one can speculate as to its origins. A theory is that it represents the second chapter of a German fraternity created at Yale University in 1832. Another explanation comes from Genesis 3:22. Then the Lord God said, Behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. And now he might stretch out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. Genesis 3:22. Yale University and the Skull and Bones Secret Society has had some interesting involvements in Chinese politics, partially due to the potential within the country's active opium trade. With the exception of the Carter administration 1976 to 1980, all United States ambassadors to Beijing since Henry Kissinger's initial dealings with Mao back in the early 1970s have been members of the Skull and Bones Secret Society. This is quite a feat when considering that only 15 new initiates are created each year. At the start of the 20th century, Yale Divinity School established a number of schools and hospitals throughout China, known as Yale in China. Perceived by many as another non-profit philanthropic charitable organization, it was designed to develop educational programs in China which would further relations and understanding between the Chinese and American people. It could also be seen as a front aimed at influencing political change and to alter the beliefs of the Chinese people. Writing in the Yale Daily News, Jonathan Spence, a professor of Chinese history at Yale University, reveals that Yale in China supported Mao Zedong's rise to power. In 1919, when Mao was 26, the Students' Union invited him to take over editorship of the Yale Journal. Mao accepted the position, where he quickly changed its format, promoting his own social criticisms and Marxist ideology. China was in the throes of great change after the fall of the old imperialistic system. A new republic under Sun Yat-sen could see China competing against the West economically and militarily. The Western elites preferred a tougher approach, one which would keep China in a perpetual state of backwardness, a command and control structure which was simple and authoritarian, keeping a boot firmly stamping on China's progress for decades. Mao's Communist Party could do just that. Once Mao was in full control, he turned China into the world's largest opium producer. Within the inner circles of some secret societies, ancient medieval and occult rituals take place. Behavior and practices which most of us would find bizarre or so disturbing that we would not understand or comprehend the occult meaning of what was taking place. Without appreciating it, the majority of us live within the parameters of social norms, based around the tree of life and its pathways of morality with a basic sense of common decency, as though the Creator has installed within each one of us a basic code of morality and conduct. This is the covenant I will make with the people of Israel after that time, declares the Lord. I will put my law in their minds and write it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they will be my people. Jeremiah 31:33. For those who distance themselves from the tree of life and the Creator, searching for material fulfillment over spirituality, will find that the divine spark within them will slowly withdraw and become suffocated by their new perverted morality as they descend across the Red Sea down into the tree of death. Their new dark perspective of reality will be supported, confirmed, and encouraged by the people they associate with, people already lost on dark pathways, as the Qliphoth opens them up to new and greater circumstances which ultimately lead them further down into the depths of Hades. The inner circles of some dark secret societies use blackmail as a mechanism of control over their minions in the outer circles. Members who hold influential positions within society can be targeted for use to the society's overall objectives. The easiest and most effective way to compromise an average individual of mediocre morality who is slightly on the naive side concerning occult matters is to subject them to an encounter with someone just under the age of consent. This can be done in many ways. On one side there are middle-aged men who don't get much attention back home, or men with inflated egos who could find themselves in an all-expenses-paid hotel while on a business trip. On the other side there are many young people just below the age of consent who look older than their years, who are not only impressionable but also prepared to do almost anything for money. Consequently, if these young people are recruited by unscrupulous individuals to proposition those who require compromising, and if the older person takes the bait, then those with the evidence to expose them have a new obedient recruit for life. This is a popular tactic used among the elite circles to keep those outside under control. This is one reason why so many children go missing each year. They are either groomed for use in child sex trafficking circles or used for occult satanic ritual sacrifices. For the highest spiritual working, one must accordingly choose the victim which contains the greatest and purest force. A male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence is the most satisfactory and suitable victim. Aleister Crowley, English occultist. The International Labour Organization estimates that there are as many as 1.8 million children sexually trafficked worldwide, while UNICEF's 2006 State of the World's Children report reports this number to be 2 million. The International Labour Organization has found that girls involved in other forms of child labour, such as domestic service or street vending, are at the highest risk of being pulled into commercial child sex trafficking. Recently, both Britain and America have witnessed some of the peripheral workings of these underage paedophile sex rings, organised crime syndicates of the most despicable kind, conducting their affairs within circles of the filthy rich and famous, a practice which appears to have been going on for decades, culminating in the exposure of two of the most notorious procurements of children for purposes of underage sex ever to be seen. I am referring to Jimmy Savile in the United Kingdom and Jeffrey Epstein in the United States. Both have been guests within the inner circles of British royalty, an embarrassment for royalty which leaves big questions as to the actual scale of the problem. When we are born, we come into this world as a unique expression of divine light which emanates from the pleroma at the centre of the galaxy. Consequently, children are closer to the divine source than the rest of us. The jealous gods of the Qliphoth are inversions of the Creator. They will only bestow in a material sense if they themselves receive constant adoration, together with frequent sacrifices. Unlike the Tree of Life, it is not a spiritual transaction, but a material one, requiring continuous upkeep. When a group of dark occultists get together to converse with their satanic gods, they change the surrounding atmosphere with psychic tension, using various methods, many of which are perversions or inversions of religious ceremonies. With demonic mantra and mindful intent, together with sexual energy, they narrow the gap between this reality and that of the Qliphoth, lifting the divide for whatever entities wish to integrate with their sadistic congregation. When the atmosphere is full of psychic tension, they either perform perverted sexual acts on each other or with animals and children. Occasionally they will sacrifice a victim. After a drawn-out period of torture, the victim's blood is consumed. The blood of the tortured person is said to contain natural hallucinogenics, adrenaline, and stimulants which have the added potential, when consumed, of altering a person's perception of reality while promoting various connections with entities from demonic realms. In some satanic circles, the lifeless body of the sacrificed victim is used as a vessel for summoning demonic spirits, which take over and animate the corpse while acting as a medium for communicating with the Qliphoth and their armies of demons. This is known as necromancy or death magic, an ancient practice which sheds some light on the skull and bones obsession with rituals centered around human remains. Once involved in a satanic cult, it is not easy to get out. Although there is an inner circle, the members on the outer rings are tested and compromised to see how far they will go to impress their peers by showing their complete disregard for all forms of expressions of divine spirit within creation. In other words, these people will go to any lengths to cause death and destruction on the rest of humanity as they descend down the left-hand path, defiling their own divine spark in the process. In a 2013 article in the Daily Extra, the author described the Bohemian Grove as former American President Richard Nixon called it the most faggy goddamn thing you can imagine. Bohemian Grove is a men's club that meets for 2 weeks in July in Mount Rio, California. The most powerful men in the world, bankers, politicians, movie stars, and the elite of society make up the guest list. There's been a lot of speculation about what goes on at Bohemian Grove, and as most conspiracy videos on YouTube will tell you, it's allegedly 2 weeks of the filthy rich, powerful and famous walking around naked and fucking each other, as well as gay male, female and child prostitutes. Oh yeah, in between performing occult rituals, of course. It is suspected that so many people within the higher cogs of politics, the legal profession and the media are so heavily compromised by nefarious organizations that any investigation leading to their exposure will never get far enough to cause any damage due to their loyalty towards one another. Perth police say they have proven a link between organized child sex abuse and devil worship, following the conviction on Monday of a young man on 22 charges of indecent assault and dealing and of evil intent. The head of WA's Child Sex Abuse Unit, Detective Sergeant Roger Smith, said the conviction of Scott Brian Guzenton demonstrated the link. Satanic practices and the associated abuse perpetrated on children is prevalent in the United States and Britain, and no one can now doubt that the link can be made here. Sergeant Smart said Guzenton, 20, pleaded guilty to all charges and was remanded until April the 5th for sentencing, after the district court was told that 13 witchcraft covens operated in Perth. Judge Kennedy was told that Guzenton had been a victim of sex abuse as an 8-year-old and had been recruited as a teenager into a satanic cult where adults practice bizarre sex with each other, their own children and teenage recruits. The Sydney Morning Herald, March the 13th, 1991. Police have uncovered evidence of Central Coast sites used in satanic rituals to which drawings made by children who claim to have been abused bear an eerie resemblance. One mother's traumatic child tells of adult groups hanging him from a cross, killing animals, performing sexual acts on cult members and watching orgies. A child from a separate family who does not know the other children tells an identical story. The Sun Herald has seen evidence of the rituals. One mother, Guinevere, who has fought a 4-year campaign to have authorities probe her claims, said her case was similar to 33 other cases reported to the Department of Community Services. Medical evidence has proved that both Guinevere's children have been abused. I'm coming across more and more women who tell the same story, she said. I've spent years trying to get help for my children, but there are people who don't want this to come out. Sun Herald, Australia, 8th of August, 1999. In 2003, 5 members of the Superior Universal Alignment cult in the Amazonian town of Altamira were convicted for the ritualistic murders of 3 children and the castration of 2 others. The victims were aged between 8 and 13 years, and they were kidnapped, tortured or killed between 1989 and 1993. Their genitals were removed and used in satanic rituals by 75-year-old clairvoyant Valentina de Andrade, the leader of the Superior Universal Alignment cult. De Andrade had previously been sought by police in Argentina and Uruguay, prior to her arrest in Brazil on suspicion of involvement in other satanic ritual killings. List of satanic ritual abuse allegations, Wikipedia. In 2003, allegations by 3 children in Lewis, Scotland, resulted in the arrest of 8 people for sexual abuse occurring between 1990 and 2000. A 2005 investigation by the Social Work Inspection Agency found extensive evidence of sexual, physical, and emotional abuse and neglect. Police investigation resulted in allegations of an island-wide satanic paedophile ring. Though charges were dropped 9 months later following an inconclusive investigation, a key witness who had implicated her family in the abuse and whose evidence was vital to the case of satanic abuse recanted her testimony in 2006, and the media raised questions about the nature of the police interviewing techniques, with a police spokesperson replying that the witness was questioned appropriately and that allegations were made by numerous witnesses. When these satanic cults sodomize and torture children, they are taking part in the ultimate sin, the desecration of the closest connection to divine light. Furthermore, to participate in the communal blood drinking of their victims compromises the participants to such an extent that it cements their place within the cult itself, as they all witness one another's involvement in the murder of innocents. They collectively defile the divine spark which once occupied their own hearts and gave them life. In 2018, an ex-Illuminati banker by the name of Ronald Bernard gave a testimony in front of an audience of representatives of his community, including clergy, local authority and law officials. During the course of his testimony, he admitted to being drawn deeper into a network of Satanists, who included him as part of their corrupt business affairs, together with various satanic rituals. After many years of living a lavish lifestyle from the proceeds of crime, he was asked to take part in a ritual involving children being sacrificed. At this point, he realized he had become too deeply involved and no longer had the stomach for it. Subsequently, he made the decision to walk away. This wasn't easy for him. It took him over 10 years, costing him almost everything he had. However, he was determined to do whatever was necessary to break away from his dark and sinister past. At the end of his testimony, he said. It's about a dark force who enjoys destroying all life on this planet, and it's still going on. Ronald Bernard, 2018. This is the verdict. Light has come into the world, but people loved darkness instead of light, because their deeds were evil. Everyone who does evil hates the light, and will not come into the light for fear that their deeds will be exposed. But whoever lives by the truth comes into the light, so that it may be seen plainly that what they have done has been done in the sight of God. John 3:19-21.